Fine. So now, okay. So because the listening section is the easiest section out of all the 4 sections, you have to ensure that your minimum score in listening is an 8 out of 9, which is actually quite possible to get. I would say it's quite easy to get an 8 out of 9 in listening. Now, academic or general, whatever you're doing, listening is exactly the same. You have 40 questions. You have got 30 minutes time to answer 40 questions. I'm going to tell you how the division is going to be. So you're going to get 40 questions, half an hour. For paper based, you have an extra 10 minutes to transfer the answer to the answer sheet. Now, you have 4 sections, and each of the section is a totally different recording. As in, section 1 is always a conversation between 2 people. And if you notice, whenever you're doing section 1, you will see that the conversation is normally on a social context. For instance, there's a lady who loses her bag in the airport. So she goes and complains to the person who is standing there. So any social context. Any social context is section number 1. Section 2, for example, booking tickets to a theater. Anything which is basically to do with socio-cultural context. And you will see section 2 is always a monologue, one person speaking. For example, you have a welcome talk for new college students. I won't say this is always applicable in part 2. In part 2, normally it's also a social context. For example, a news reader reading out a news, or a particular person telling you how to use a very difficult electronic device. So one person speaking, that's your section 2. Section 3 and section 4 are supposed to be academic oriented every time. You will see that section 1 and section 2 are always socio-cultural related topics, and section 3 is always about 2 or 4 people discussing about something related to education or training, anything to do with college campus education, anything to do with academics. Section 4 is always a lecture on an academic subject. So if you notice, it's an alternate conversation conversation monologue. In short, you have 2 dialogues and 2 monologues. So this is the way it's framed. Every section has 10 questions. So 10 questions in section 1, 10 section 2, 10 section 3, 10 section 4. It goes in increasing difficulty level. In section 1 and 2, you should not get a single question incorrect. You have to remember that section 3 and section 4 are comparatively tougher than section 1 and section 2. So you should actually not get a single error in the first 2 sections. You have to focus on a couple of things. Whenever you're doing any listening section, you have to understand that the main idea that the topic is about, you have to focus on that, and what are the factual information, what are the facts and the details that are shared. The speaker, what is the attitude of the speaker? So is the speaker apprehensive? Is he positive? Is he doubtful? What is the opinion that he gives? Now, especially these types of questions are very important in your 3rd and 4th section. In the 1st and 2nd section, it's not that tough. If a speaker says something, what is the purpose behind him saying something? And you have to learn the ability to follow any idea. Now, for that, to understand these 4 concepts, remember, it's important for you to practice as many listening practice tests as possible. It's freely available. You can easily practice. And also remember that 9 out of 9 in listening is quite a common feature. It's not even like, I would say more than 50% of the students get 9 out of 9. So it's quite common. Now, to get a 9, you can make only maximum one error. And if it's like, even if you make one error, you'll actually get a 9. 8.5, the score is between 37 and 38. So you can basically make 2 errors for an 8.5. So you should aim from day one not to make more than 3 errors, so that whatever happens, your minimum score in listening should be 8. So I would say 3 to be on the safe side. So you may make 4 errors and get an 8, but to be on the safe side, focus on not making more than 3 errors. So even if you make 4 errors, actually you end up getting a 7, and then getting an 8, but it's always better to see that you make a maximum of 3 errors. Now these 3 errors, you'll tend to make those 3 errors mostly in the last 2 sections. So just focused, because today, remember, we are doing the first 3 sections though. So in the first 2 sections especially, I do not want you to make any errors. Try and see. Now there are some techniques that you have to focus, but first let's talk about all the different types of questions. Now in section 1 and section 2, you will have a lot of forms and tables or a flow chart to complete. For example, you have to fill up a table. There's a form in which you have to write your name, address, phone number. So these sections are normally a part of your section 1. The multiple choice questions, single and multiple answers, are mainly a part of section 3, multiple choice questions. Matching and map and plan and diagram can be a part of 2 or 4. But overall, matching sentences, multiple choice, any diagram labeling, layout of a building, map, and a couple of summary completion. Now, whenever you have to fill up places, time, and any prices, be very careful. No spelling errors. Again, singular and plural matters. You have to focus on the grammatical structure. So if it's an adjective form, you have to write an adjective form. So if the answer is extreme, you can't write extremely. If the answer is tenacious, you can't write tenacity. So be very careful, as in the noun, pronoun, verb aspect of it. Focus on the singular and plural, and you cannot make any spelling mistakes because you don't have any partial marking for incorrect answer. Whenever they're using names, addresses, and telephone numbers, be comfortable with the accents and the way they are pronouncing a word. Now that will come only by practice. Remember, you're going to have various different accents: British accent, Australian accent, then not Indian English, but otherwise a lot of accents. You have to get comfortable with those. Now, whenever they are describing a place, the map and diagram labeling questions and the plan questions are normally considered as slightly tough questions. So we will do a slightly more extra practice next week. But remember, this is a question type that requires a bit of practice, and normally you're going to have at least 5 to 7 questions in a map or a plan question, and that is normally the last few questions of section 2. Most of the time, those are the last few questions of section 2. For example, I would say from question number 16 to 20 or 15 to 20. So 1 to 10 is section 1 and 15 to 20. So between 5 and 7 questions you'll get in plan or map. So basically it's a visual representation, and you have to focus on the time and you have to focus on the way it is framed. Fine. So now you may have very short answer questions wherein you have to fill in with 1 or 2 words. It can be to do with the name of a place or some price or some time. So just focus on the word limit, and then you should not have a problem. Now, whenever you're doing, what are the typical distractors? First, I'm going to tell you. Now, I'm showing you all the trap questions that come in your IELTS listening. See, for example, Sam is saying, "Thank you, I've received your email. So it is Lauren Lauren-Hanson@gmail.com. Lauren, no, you have mistaken. It is Lauren Hampson, M. So if you notice, he might say that, okay, it's not N for Netherlands, but it's M for Malaysia. So you have to be very careful because they keep on changing. Spelled with an M, they're going to tell you. I have seen many a times this typical distractors, or these are termed as trap questions. Do not immediately fill in the answer the moment you listen to it. You have to listen to a slightly longer part of the entire conversation on lecture because they are going to change it. So this is one of the most important things that I want you to consider. Don't fall into this trap. So these trap questions are there in all the 4 sections. When you have a couple of seconds to listen to the, they'll give you some seconds to read the questions before you listen to the audio. You have to spend active time in reading the passage with total concentration so that you can predict, or you can more or less understand what is the author trying to say. So you can predict because you have already read the question. See, remember, unlike other exams, like for example, if I'm taking TOEFL as an example, you don't have this option of getting the question paper before you listen to the audio. For IELTS, that's a positive thing. You have to utilize that and understand that when you get the question paper before you listen to the audio, it is actually a great boon for all of you because you know what sort of information you will be listening for. That's extremely important. Think about it. Now, if I don't even know that which question I'm going to get, it becomes very difficult. But once I have a question paper, I know, okay, these are the questions that I'm going to get. So just learn the art of skimming through the question paper, the first 5 questions and then 6 to 10 questions, especially in the first 2 questions, or first 2 sections. Now, next thing is that all your keywords. Watch out for word indicators. So if you know, however, you know it should be a contradiction. You have the word but, again a contradiction. You have words like finally, so you know it's talking about a result. So again, you have to focus on these things also because this will help you to anticipate what the speaker will be saying. Spelling is very important. As I told you, you're going to lose marks. Grammar is the part that I told you that focus a lot on the grammatical construction of the sentence. You may write in lowercase or capital letters, does not matter. So don't worry about that part of it. It makes no difference whether you write in, a lowercase or in capital letters. And a lot of practice is required. Now, one word or a number. When it says one word or a number, you cannot write a single word extra. Okay. So we are going to just one second, let me pause. So we are going to do this. I want all of you to be ready. So I'll play all the 10 questions and then I'll read out the answer. And then if you have any doubt, you can ask me. But remember, section 1 is comparatively easier. So I don't think you should be having a problem. But we can discuss it also. So I'm going to play. Please have your question paper ready. Your answer sheet ready. Remember, the other thing is that audio will be played only once. So concentration is required here. Especially in the last section of the listening, wherein the entire 10 question goes in one order. See, in section 1 and section 2, what they do is that they tell you that we'll be doing question number 1 to 5. Okay, and then you'll have it 6 to 10. So normally it's divided into 2 parts so that you don't have to focus on all the 10 questions. But in section 4, 90% of the time they tell you the entire lecture in one shot. So question number 31 to 40 will be done in one shot. Okay, so let me start now. Yeah. Just check once. Let me play.
A telephone conversation
Can you hear?
between
Yeah.
an
Yes, ma'am.
official at a village hall and a woman who wants to hire a public room. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello?
Oh, hello. I wanted to inquire about hiring a room in the village hall for the evening of September the 1st.
Let me just see. Yes, we have both rooms available that evening. There's our main hall, that's got seating for 200 people, or there's the Charlton room.
The main hall seats 200, so 200 has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello?
Oh, hello. I wanted to inquire about hiring a room in the village hall for the evening of September the 1st.
Let me just see. Yes, we have both rooms available that evening. There's our main hall, that's got seating for 200 people, or there's the Charlton room.
Sorry?
The Charlton room, CHARLTON. That's got seating for up to 100.
Well, we're organising a dinner to raise money for a charity, and we're hoping for at least 150 people. So, I think we'll go for the main hall. How much would that cost?
Let's see. You wanted it for the evening of September the 1st?
Yes, that's a Saturday.
So from 6 p.m. to midnight, that'd be £115. That's the weekend price. It's £75 on weekdays.
That's all right.
And I have to tell you, there's also a deposit of £250, which is returnable, of course, as long as there's no damage. But we do insist that this is paid in cash. We don't take cards for that. You can pay the actual rent of the room however you like, though. Cash, credit card, cheque.
Oh, well, I suppose that's okay. So, does the charge include use of tables and chairs and so on?
Oh, yes.
And what about parking?
Yeah, that's all included. The only thing that isn't included is, you said you were organising a dinner?
Yeah.
Well, you'll have to pay extra for the kitchen if you want to use that. It's £25. It's got very good facilities, good quality cookers and fridges and so on.
OK. Well, I suppose that's all right. We can cover the cost in our entry charges.
Right, so I'll make a note of that. Now, there are just one or two things you need to think about before the event. For example, you'll have to see about getting a licence if you're planning to have any music during the meal.
Oh, really?
It's quite straightforward. I'll give you the details later on. And about a week or 10 days before your event, you'll need to contact the caretaker, that's Mr. Evans, to make the arrangements for entry. He'll sort that out with you.
And do I give him the payment as well?
No, you do that directly with me.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Right. Now, is there anything I need to know about what happens during the event?
Well, as you'll be aware, of course, the building is no smoking throughout.
Of course.
Now, are you having a band?
Yes.
Well, they'll have a lot of equipment, so rather than using the front door, they should park their van round the back and use the stage door there. You can open that from inside, but don't forget to lock it at the end.
OK.
And talking of bands, I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but you must make sure that no one fiddles about with the black box by the fire door. That's a system that cuts in when the volume reaches a certain level. It's a legal requirement.
Sure. Anyway, we want people to be able to talk to one another, so we don't want anything too loud. Oh, that reminds me. We'll be having speeches. Are there any microphones available?
Yep, just let the caretaker know. He'll get those for you. Right, now, when the event is over, we do ask that the premises are left in good condition. So there's a locked cupboard, and you'll be informed of the code you need to open that. It's got all the cleaning equipment, brushes and detergent and so on.
Right. So what do we need to do after everyone's gone? Sweep the floors, I suppose?
Well, actually, they have to be washed, not just swept. Then you'll be provided with black plastic bags, so all the rubbish must be collected up and left outside the door.
Of course. We'll make sure everything's left tidy. Oh, and I forgot to ask. I presume we can have decorations in the room?
Yes, but you must take them down afterwards.
Sure.
And the chairs and tables should be stacked up neatly at the back of the room.
I'll make sure I've got a few people to help me.
That is the end of section 1.
Okay.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Okay, so now, after I tell you the answers, all of you will let me know how many you have got right. And then I'll tell you the importance of focusing on the question before you listen to the audio. Always remember, whether you're doing a reading or a listening section, the headings are very important. So here, when you did the initial reading, if you feel that, okay, you're not a fast reader, the best thing that you can do is complete reading all the headlines. So you know that you had to understand about the room and cost. You had to know what happened before the event, during the event, and after the event. So the moment you look at any section, just focus on how many subparts are there. So that is the broader idea. Now, after you get the broader holistic picture, then you go for specific details. So you know that you have the word dollar, so you know it has to do with pricing. You have cost includes use of tables, chairs, and also, so you know it has to be a noun. Then the band should use the dash door. So door can be front or back or whatever. It has to describe the door. Okay, so you have to focus on all those things. It will become easier for you because you're predicting an answer while you are looking at the question. And obviously, you're going to read hiring a public room. This is very important. This and the subheadings. So this is the first step that you're going to do the moment you start your listening section. So let's look at your answers. Just check. And if you notice, they don't use the word R. We say R. They don't use the word R. Have you noticed? R. The word R is not pronounced. Okay, so be very careful. Get used to the pronunciation of the word. So the first one is Charlton. Second is 115. Cash. Third is cash. Fourth is parking. Fifth, music. 6, entry. 7, stage. 8, code. Code for the cleaning cupboard. 9, it can be both singular and plural for both 9 and 10. Floor or floors. decoration and decoration. So in some of the questions, you're going to see that both singular and plural form are fine, but in some you're going to see that only singular form matters, or plural. So if you notice, when they were talking about 115, when they spoke about the prices, the official first used the word, so from 6 p.m. to midnight, uh, uh, that will be something like 115, and then the official says that it's 75 on the weekdays. So what happens? And then the official again says there's also a deposit of 250. So now you were actually given with three information: 115, 75, 250. So unless you are focused, at times you might lose that. So then again, when he's talking about the parking part of it, and what about parking? And the official says, well, it's all included. But when he's talking about the music license, look at the way the sentence was framed. Here it was more in the form of a paraphrase. He wrote that the official says that you'll have to see getting a license if you're planning to have any music. That was the way. If you're planning to have any music. So the word license was before the word music. So all those things you have to be very careful when you're speaking. Arrangements for entry was mentioned. Then it talks about...
Ma'am,
Tell me.
instead of entry, entrance is okay, or
No. Whatever
no?
words they use, na. So that's the reason I was telling you. Focus on the formation of the word. If it's entry, you have to write entry. You can't write entrance.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So now that door question, it says that stage door, right? You can use the stage door. So when I was doing this for the first time, I was thinking, okay, it'll be the back door or the front door. But the answer was stage door. At least you know that, okay, fine. You are looking for something. So these are the things that you have to be very careful. So when he's talking about the cupboard, if you notice, he was saying ki there's a locked cupboard and you'll be informed of the code. So obviously when you're talking about a locked cupboard, it has to be CODE code. It can't be any other code. See, for example, if you're not doing active listening, you listen to the word code, but you say, oh, code, and you get confused with court, COURT, because pronunciation is the same. So unless you are actively listening and understanding, now remember, this will become very important when you go further. Not only listening, but also understanding. Otherwise, code, when I'm saying code, it can be anything. Right. See, for example, when I'm saying, so all these similar sounding words, so they will purposely give you similar sounding words so that you get confused if you're not listening to it properly. So all those things you have to remember. Okay. So now tell me, what are your scores? Uh, yeah, what are the scores? All of you got 10 out of 10? You wrote entrance, is it?
I got 7. Actually, I missed. Instead of 115, I thought it is 150.
150, na 50. Yeah, that many of them.
Then I couldn't able to pick that music.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Then also I made a mistake at that floor. Floor also I didn't get after the event.
The floors must be washed. Okay, so basically headings. Remember, Neha, what about you? Anjana, what about you?
Ma'am, I got 9. Why same 150? I heard 150 in place of 115.
Yeah. So these are the things. So in section 1, remember, the primary problem in section 1 is the confusion between the alphabets and the numbers, because obviously our way of pronunciation is very different from theirs. So be very careful. Anjana, what about you? Anjana? Okay. Anjana, let me know if you can't hear, or like if you're not able to speak. Yeah. Fine. So the next section, remember, section 2 is complete the notes. So complete the notes is exactly like the reading section. You have a fill in the blank question either in the beginning or middle or end. Again, be very careful about what you are reading. So before you start listening to it, you know that it is talking about a heritage farm, and the person is going to give advice about visiting the farm. And he is basically giving advice on what visitors should do. So now when you have an idea that, okay, fine, I'm listening to an audio wherein it's talking about visitors, maybe not harm any, obviously it has to be animals, so maybe they will be specifying some animal, not touch any, wear something, obviously prevent something preventative, not bring any, mostly food it should be. So you can do a bit of prediction if you have only 4 to 5 questions. Okay, so let's start.
Section 2. You will hear a guide talking to a group of visitors to a farm. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Welcome to the Fiddy Working Heritage Farm. This open-air museum gives you the experience of agriculture and rural life in the English countryside at the end of the 19th century. So you'll see a typical farm of that period, and like me, all the staff are dressed in clothes of that time. I must give you some advice and safety tips before we go any further. As it's a working farm, please don't frighten or injure the animals. We have a lot here, and many of them are breeds that are now quite rare. And do stay at a safe distance from the tools. Some of them have sharp points, which can be pretty dangerous, so please don't touch them. We don't want any accidents, do we? The ground is very uneven, and you might slip if you're wearing sandals, so I'm glad to see you're all wearing shoes. We always advise people to do that. Now, children of all ages are very welcome here, and usually even very young children love the ducks and lambs, so do bring them along next time you come. I don't think any of you have brought dogs with you, but in case you have, I'm afraid they'll have to stay in the car park unless they're guide dogs. I'm sure you'll understand that they could cause a lot of problems on a farm.
Okay, so now if you notice, my prediction was not bring any food. Okay, because you are not, you don't want to feed the animals. But here it was not bring any animals. If you notice, he clearly says that you can get ducks and what was it? You can get ducks and lambs, but you cannot get dogs. So if you notice, the 14th answer is dogs, but with certain exceptions. So exception was you can get. So he's talking to the children. You can get ducks and lambs, but don't get dogs because then they have to stay in the car park. Okay. Now, answers for this would be 11th is animal or animals. 12, tool or tools, both singular, plural is fine. Wear shoes. He says they don't wear sandals, wear shoes. So it's animals, tool, shoes, and dogs. Any doubt? Okay, now I want all of you to be extremely careful with this question. So as I told you, the last normally, like most of the time, this last section of the second part is your map or a flowchart. Now, whenever you have a map or a flowchart, it's always confusing. I'm going to make you listen to this twice. Once I'll make you listen to it, read out the answers, then I'll again make you listen to it. Because this question type is actually a tough type of question. Now, you will always focus on what is given. So, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. So, you have, so around side path only you have D, E, F. Main path, side path, just keep on focusing on what is there. So, he starts with you're here. So at times they are going to tell you you're here. At times they will give you some other directions, maybe north, south, east, west, or they might give you something, or you're near the car park. So always focus on your starting point, because unless you're focusing on the starting point, if it says go straight adjacent to that, directly opposite to it, look at your northeast side, So they might give you directions in any form. So you're not going to get it unless you read the map and see how many answers from where it starts, A, B, C, D. So where is A? First find out where is A. So this is B. A is here. Okay, now if you do not focus on A and you only focus on this part, so always see which is the starting question. Okay, A is here. Now if you were only focusing on B, C, D, E, F, G, and then again, so if you notice F, G, H is here. So be careful about the way it is presented on this, on your question paper also. Now, when you look at the question paper of a map, so out of 15 to 20, you know that you are supposed to answer where the scarecrow is, maze, cafe, black barn, covered picnic area, fairy house. So these are the different places that they are going to discuss. Okay, so first let me do this with you. I want all of you to try and then we'll discuss.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20.
Okay, just one second. I have to tell you something. So now so you will look at this one. The moment after you finish looking at this one, immediately look at this. So you know that this is the key point. They're going to talk about the scarecrow, maze, cafe, black barn. So just focus on these key areas. The extra flux you can ignore. So you know that you have to focus on these areas. Okay.
Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Now let me give you some idea of the layout of the farm. The building where you bought your tickets is the new barn immediately to your right. And we're now at the beginning of the main path to the farmland. And of course, the car park is on your left. The scarecrow you can see in the car park in the corner beside the main path is a traditional figure for keeping the birds away from crops. But our scarecrow is a permanent sculpture. It's taller than a human being, so you can see it from quite a distance. If you look ahead of you, you'll see a maze. It's opposite the new barn, beside the side path that branches off to the right, just over there. The maze is made out of hedges which are too tall for young children to see over them, but it's quite small, so you can't get lost in it. Now, can you see the bridge crossing the fish pool further up the main path? If you want to go to the cafe, go towards the bridge and turn right just before it. Walk along the side path and the cafe's on the first bend you come to. The building was originally the schoolhouse and it's well over 100 years old. As you may know, we run skills workshops here, where you can learn traditional crafts like woodwork and basket making. You can see examples of the work and talk to someone about the courses in the Black Barn. If you take the side path to the right, here, just by the new barn, you'll come to the Black Barn, just where the path first bends. Now, I mustn't forget to tell you about picnicking, as I can see some of you have brought your lunch with you. You can picnic in the field, though do clear up behind you, of course. Or if you'd prefer a covered picnic area, there's one near the farmyard, just after you cross the bridge. There's a covered picnic spot on the right. And the last thing to mention is Fiddy House itself. From here you can cross the bridge, then walk along the footpath through the field to the left of the farmyard. That goes to the house, and it'll give you a lovely view of it. It's certainly worth a few photographs, but as it's a private home, I'm afraid you can't go inside. Right, well, if you're all ready, we'll set off on our tour of the farm.
Okay, now what I'm going to do is first I'll tell you the answers, okay? And then we will again listen to this. So this is the answer, FGDHCA. Just look at the answer. So F is Scarecrow. The moment you started, it's Scarecrow. I'll make you listen to it again. G is the maze. D is the cafe. H is black barn. C is the covered picnic area. And A is feeding house. Okay, so now I want you to listen to it again. I'm going to make you...
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions
I'm going to stop in
15
between.
to 20.
Like after I'm doing each question, I'll stop.
Please play the audio, ma'am.
Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Now let me give you some idea of the layout of the farm. The building where you bought your tickets is the new barn immediately to your right. And we're now at the beginning of the main path to the farmland. And of course, the car park is on your left. The scarecrow you can see in the car park in the corner beside the main path is a traditional figure for keeping
Have you
the
noticed the
birds
starting
away
part? If you get it wrong, you're going to get it totally wrong. Because if you know, it very clearly says that the building where you brought your ticket is the new barn. And he very clearly says immediately to your right. And we are now at beginning something like to the main path of the farmland. And your car park is to your left. So you know that you're going this way. So your car park is to the left, and then they talk about this. So the first part, you have to be very careful.
from crops. But our scarecrow is a permanent sculpture. It's taller than a human being, so you can see it from quite a distance. If you look ahead of you, you'll see a maze. It's opposite the new barn, beside the side path that branches off to the right,
Now,
just
if you
over
notice
there.
that question, it very clearly now, what does it say? It says that if you look ahead of you, you'll see a maze. So if you look ahead of you, you'll see a maze. It's opposite the new barn. It very clearly says it's opposite the new barn. So it's G, opposite the new barn. That itself was the most important clue. It's opposite the new barn. And it also says it's beside the side path. Beside, opposite the new barn. So that itself was the clue.
Now listen and answer questions.
Now let me give you some idea of the layout of the farm. The building where you bought your tickets is the new barn immediately to your right. And we're now at the beginning of the main path to the farmland. And of course, the car park is on your left. The scarecrow you can see in the car park in the corner beside the main path is a traditional figure for keeping the birds away from crops. But our scarecrow is a permanent sculpture. It's taller than a human being, so you can see it from quite a distance. If you look ahead of you, you'll see a maze. It's opposite the new barn, beside the side path that branches off to the right, just over there. The maze is made out of hedges which are too tall for young children to see over them, but it's quite small, so you can't get lost in it. Now, can you see the bridge crossing the fish pool further up the main path? If you want to go to the cafe, go towards the bridge and turn right just before
So
it.
go towards the bridge and turn right before it. If you want to, you go further up near the fish pool, it very clearly says. So if you want to go to the cafe, go towards the bridge and turn right just before it. It says the bridge crossing the fish pool. So you know fish pool is here. That's another landmark. So it says before the fish pool, you turn right and walk along the side path, and then it talks about the black barn. So this is the way you're supposed to do. Lots of practice required. Remember, I want you all to practice a lot. This section, this part, like randomly from our site, take all the map questions and practice. I want to do section 3 now. So section 3 is a tough section because multiple choice questions in listening is always considered as very tough. According to my experience, most of the students find section 3 the toughest, followed by the map. The reason why it's considered as toughest is because they are going to confuse you, give you lots of trap words in the option. You will see that if you're not very, very careful, you'll fall in the trap. So the idea of doing multiple choice question, which is always section 3, and normally all the questions in section 3 are multiple choice. You'll always have 3 options. So at times you might feel, okay, I do not have 5 or 6 options. I have 3 options and it's going to be easy. Remember, it's not going to be easy because at times they're going to, as I told you, give a lot of distractors and confuse you. So let's do this because this is something that actually is going to be slide. Look at the
Section
topic.
3. You will hear 2 psychology students called Lisa and Greg discussing a project they have to do. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27.
OK, Greg. So I finally managed to read the article you mentioned, the one about the study on gender in physics.
About the study of college students done by Akira Miyake and his team. Yeah, I was interested that the researchers were actually a mix of psychologists and physicists. That's an unusual combination.
Yeah. I got a little confused at first about which students the study was based on. They weren't actually majoring in physics. They were majoring in what's known as the STEM disciplines. That's science, technology, engineering and
math. Yes, but they were all doing physics courses as part of their studies.
That's correct. So, as I understood it, Miyake and co. started from the fact that women are underrepresented in introductory physics courses at college, and also that, on average, the women who do enrol on these courses perform more poorly than the men. No one really knows why this is the case.
Yeah, but what the researchers wanted to find out was basically what they could do about the relatively low level of the women's results. But in order to find a solution, they needed to find out more about the nature of the problem.
Right. Now, let's see if I can remember. It was that in the physics class, the female students thought the male students all assumed that women weren't any good at physics. Was that it? And they thought that the men expected them to get poor results in their tests.
That's what the women thought, and that made them nervous, so they did get poor results. But actually, they were wrong. No one was making any assumptions about the female students at all.
Anyway, what Miyake's team did was quite simple, getting the students to do some writing before they went into the physics class. What did they call it?
Values affirmation. They had to write an essay focusing on things that were significant to them, not particularly to do with the subject they were studying, but more general things like music or people who mattered to them.
Right. So the idea of doing the writing is that this gets the students thinking in a positive way.
And putting these thoughts into words can relax them and help them overcome the psychological factors that lead to poor performance. Yeah. But what the researchers in the study hadn't expected was that this one activity raised the women's physics grades from the C to the B range.
A huge change. Pity it wasn't to an A. but still. No, but it does suggest that the women were seriously underperforming beforehand in comparison with the men.
Yes. Mind you, Miyake's article left out a lot of details, like did the students do the writing just once or several times? And had they been told why they were doing the writing? That might have affected the results.
You mean if they know the researchers thought it might help them to improve, then they just try to fulfill that expectation?
Exactly.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 28 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
So anyway, I thought for our project we could do a similar study, but investigate whether it really was the writing activity that had that result.
OK, so we could ask them to do a writing task about something completely different, something more factual, like a general knowledge topic.
Maybe. Or we could have half the students doing a writing task and half doing something else, like an oral task.
Or even half do the same writing task as in the original research and half do a factual writing task. Then we'd see if it really is the topic that made the difference or something else.
That's it. Good. So, at our meeting with the supervisor on Monday, we can tell him we've decided on our project. We should have our aims ready by then. I suppose we need to read the original study. The article's just a summary.
And there was another article I read by Smolinski. It was about her research on how women and men perform in mixed teams in class, compared with single-sex teams and on their own.
Let me guess. The women were better at teamwork.
That's what I expected. But actually, the men and the women got the same results, whether they were working in teams or on their own. But I guess it's not that relevant to us.
What worries me, anyway, is how we're going to get everything done in the time.
We'll be okay now we know what we're doing. Though I'm not clear how we assess whether the students in our experiment actually make any progress or not.
No, we may need some advice on that. The main thing's to make sure we have the right size sample, not too big or too small.
That shouldn't be difficult. Right, what do we need to do next? We could have a look at the timetable for the science classes, or perhaps we should just make an appointment to see one of the science professors. That'd be better.
Great. And we could even get to observe one of the classes.
What for?
Well, OK, maybe let's just go with your idea. Right, well, I think that's everything for now.
Okay, so let me tell you the answers now. So question number 21, the answer for question number 21 is C, science, technology, engineering or mathematics. 22, it is B. What is the aim of Miyake's study? A way of improving women's performance in physics. 23 is also B. The female physics students were wrong to believe that B. The male students expected them to do badly. So that was their wrong opinion. What is question number 24? It's C. Miyake's team asked the students to write about something that was important to them personally. Question number 25, I'll come to the details in a bit. Question number 25, the answer is A. Aim of writing exercise was to reduce stress. Question number 26, what surprised the researchers about the study? What surprised was B. The positive impact it had on physics results for women. 27, it's C. Greg and Lisa think Miyake's results could have been affected by the information the students were given. 28A. Greg and Lisa decide that in their own project they will compare the effects of two different writing tasks. 29B, the main finding of Smolinski's research was that class teamwork activities were B. Activities had no effect on the performance of men or women. And the last question, 30th, what will they do next? They will talk to a professor. Now, as I told you, first you have to understand why is section 3 tough? Because firstly, it's an academic conversation, and then you normally do not even know where the answer is from. So you have to be extremely careful, as in, obviously, you have to focus on the topic, and you have to read the keywords: aim, investigate, majoring in, this one. So if you notice, first one, it started with physics, but then he clearly says, Lisa clearly says they were majoring in STEM disciplines, something like that, right? And then he talks about this. Now, in question number 22, Greg, I think, says that aim of the study was to investigate. He says something like that whether there was some relatively lower level of the women's result. That was the word he used, some relative low level of women's result. So for that, the answer is low level of women's, and look at the low level of women. So synonym, improving women's performance. So they use the word low level, and here you are talking about to investigate women's performance. Question number 23, female students were wrong, because they were very wrong because the women thought, Greg clearly says, the women thought that and that made them nervous that they will get poor results, but they were wrong. No one was making any assumption about the female students. So it very clearly says they were wrong because they were wrong in assuming that the male students expected them to do badly. He clearly says that they were wrong. Now, Miyake's team asked the students to write about. Now, that was actually quite a straightforward question. Question number 24. See, because he very clearly says, if you notice, the why is it successful experience of other people, he tells you that, okay, value affirmation, it says something about value affirmation, and he uses words like an essay focusing on something which is significant to them, things like music or people who matter to them. So if you notice, those were the meanings. So they were to write about something that was important to them personally. He clearly says that something which is value affirmation, something that is significant, something that matters to them. Now, those were the three different words, and from that you come to the crux of it, that something which is important to you personally. So you have to be extremely careful in the way you're deducing the answers. Now, question number 25, why is the answer A? What was the aim of writing exercise done by the subjects? So he again tells you that when he talks about the writing exercise, he says that it can relax them to overcome psychological factors that lead to poor performance. It can relax them, so reduce stress. So lots of synonyms like you're reading will be definitely a part of section 3. Remember that. So here they use the word reduce stress, relax them. Here they have used the word reduce stress. So you can't look at the word reduce stress in the answer. You have to see that overall what's the meaning. So ability to get the overall meaning matters the most. Now question number 26 again, what surprised is B? The positive impact it had on physics results for women. If you notice, the Greg says what the researchers hadn't expected was that something like this activity raised the women's physics grades from C to B. What it hadn't expected. So, hadn't expected, and talking about grade increase from C to B, so positive impact it had on physics results for women. Again, 27, why is it C? Greg and Lisa think Miyake's results could have been affected by the information the students were given. So they, in Miyake's article, so he says Had it been told why they were doing the writing, this might have affected the results. Had they been told why they had been writing. So the information, so it depends on the information the students were given. Because had they known, he clearly says, had they known that what was the reason, it would have affected the results. So this one was also slightly tough. So if you notice, not a single question is straightforward that way. Even in question number 28, when he says that answer is A, Greg and Lisa decide that in their own project, they will compare the effect of two different writing school. So he says, Lisa was saying, half will do the same writing task in the original research and the other half will do something to do with factual writing task. So there are two different tasks. One is original research. The other is factual task. So two different tasks. 29, again the answer is B. The main findings of Smolinski's research was the class teamwork activities. So 29, again Lisa was saying, that's what I expected, but something like men and women got the same results whether they were working in teams or on their own. He clearly says whether they were working in teams or on their own, they are at the same level. So had no effect on the performance of men or women. 30th, last one, A. What will Lisa and Greg do next? I think he says something like, we should make an appointment to see one of the science professors, something like that. So that will be better. So that's what ultimately Lisa says, that I think we should talk to or we should take an appointment with a science professor. So remember section 3, try and practice. See, section 1, do not practice more than 4 to 5 times, I would say. Like it'll not, like I don't want you to waste time. Start focusing from section 2, map, section 3, section 4. So if I'm doing 5 listening test, maybe one will be for section 1 and the first half of section 2. Primarily you'll start from the map and layout and go further down. Listen, this one has 10 questions. So at times what happens is that if you're not practicing enough, you can end up getting 6 wrong. So be very careful in the third section. So that's for today's listening. Sorry. Now we are going to do writing section. So in the writing section, we are going to do task 1 of academic. Now why is it not shifting? Okay. Yeah. So academic writing task 1. Now the first thing that you have to remember is that writing task is for 1 hour, 20 minutes. The time given is 20 minutes for task 1 and 40 minutes for task 2. Now, though they give you 20 minutes, I have seen students taking 30 minutes for task 1 or 35 minutes for task 1 and 25 minutes for task 2. Please be very careful. Do not take more than 20 minutes. You have to understand that task 1 weightage versus task 2, it's basically task 2 carries double the weightage. So you will obviously focus on task 1, but does not mean that you're going to give even half an hour for task 1. If it says 40 minutes, 20 minutes, you have to complete your answer in 20 minutes. You should not cross 20 minutes at all. Be very careful about this because you have to understand writing task carries 66%, 66.66, and that one carries 33 only, the weightage wise. Now, what happens in academic task 1? So, most of you, I would say the ratio is 80 is to 20%. Essay writing we'll do later, so I'm not talking about it right now. But basically, you have an essay and you have a task 1. So, either you get a bar chart, or you get a pie chart, or you get a line graph, or you get a table, or you'll get a combination of a bar and a pie, table and a line, or you get a map, a flow chart, a life cycle. So you will get, you do not know what you're going to get, but I have seen that 70% of the students get either bar, table, line and pie. Obviously, we have to cover all the types, but I would say 70% of 60 to 70% definitely, if not 80, will get bar, pie, table, chart. Now, what are the key areas that you need to focus? Now, if you notice, if I'm looking at this particular question, it says the bar chart shows the sector contributions to India's gross domestic product from 1960 to 2000. Ignore this part, it's always the same. Summarize the information, select and report the main features, make comparisons where relevant. It's always the same sentence. So you can just ignore that 10 seconds of reading. When it says write at least 150 words, it's always better to write around 175, 180 words. Around 20 words also you can write. 200 words also you can write. Okay, but I would say 180 would be, 180 is a good word count. Now, the first step that you should do is, whenever you are looking at any bar pie table, you will spend at least 3 to 4 minutes in observing a couple of features which I'm going to tell you. Look at obviously the x-axis, y-axis, whether it's year, percentage, whether it's in the past tense, present tense, or it's something to do with project. By 2050, it is assumed that, okay, so is it past, present, future, only past, or present, or does not talk about any timing? Now, for example, if it's a life cycle or it's a flow chart, you have to write in present tense. Now, you have a bar or a table or a line graph which is from 1960 to 2000. Everything has to be in past tense. The moment you make a mistake with the tenses in grammatical range and accuracy, that is GRA, you immediately lose scores. You do it 3 times, 3 mistakes in grammar, you can lose up till 1 score. So if it was supposed to get a 7, you end up getting a 6. So be very careful about this. Now, whether it's a percentage or a number. Now, for example, it's a percentage. It says, now by chance, if you say 40 of agricultural service, you had to write percentage. So you can't make a mistake of numbers with percentage. If you make a mistake of number versus percentage, it's a very big mistake. Immediately your score will go down. So be very observant about what you're looking at. So as I told you, you're going to have table, chart, process diagrams can be of various types. This we are going to cover next week. Map also we are going to cover next week, and life cycles also. Now, always is the same question. Summarize information, select and report the main features. Now, please look at this. They expect you to write the main features. So if you write a lot of information and don't do a comparison, then you don't get marks. Rule wise, you are supposed to definitely write about the highest and the lowest and do at least 1 or 2 comparison. That is a very good answer. Talk about the highest, talk about the lowest, and give 1 or 2 comparisons. There's a typical format that you should be using. After introduction, you should immediately give an overview. So what's an overview? How to write an introduction, how to write an overview, I'm going to come to that. But overview in short is basically a summary of what you see. For example, you have only 1 minute and you are asking me that, can you just give me a gist of what is it all about? So what would I tell you? So whatever I tell you, if I have to give it in gist in 1 single sentence, is the summary line or the overview part. So now the overview word has to be written, and it's always preferred to write it in the first paragraph rather than writing it by saying in conclusion and writing it at the end. It's preferred, though it does not make too much of a difference, but I've seen or I've interacted with examiners, and we were told that it's always preferable to use the overview or the conclusion or the summary at the end of the introductory paragraph itself. So write an introduction, write an overview, highlight the key features. Do not write everything. Give a lot of numbers, no bullet points, and obviously it's in the form of an essay with 4 paragraphs. Grading criteria for writing. whether it's part 1 or part 2. First one is task achievement or task response. In task achievement, what are the things that you are supposed to focus on? Have you achieved the task? Have you maintained 4 paragraphs apart from introduction and conclusion? You have two paragraphs in the body. There's no repetition of point in a different language. You have linked all your words correctly. You have chosen correct words. What are the different words that you need to choose here? Now, for example, you have are you using a dramatic rise, moderate rise, plummeted down, soared up, stabilized? So all those words will be there in this slide. You can go through it later. Here, the spelling mistake honestly does not matter that much. Even one spelling mistake, they honestly do not care. Lexical resource here in task 1 is about the jargon, Jargon, the words that are supposed to be used in task 1. So here, the language that they expect is task 1, academic task 1 words. Vocab plays an extremely important role. Now, I told you those parts. So now when you are writing, you will focus on these parts. What information does the x-axis and the y-axis talk about? Is it a dynamic thing or is it static? Ask the question. Okay, so you will know your tenses. Always focus on the units of measurement and the time period. And what have you learned from the title or any other labels? And trend. The word trend should be a part of your answer. What is the trend that you can observe? Okay, so what is the trend that you're observing from the entire passage? The word trend has to be a part of your answer. Like how overall your summary has to be a part of your answer. Similarly, trend. Are there any similarities between two places or two products or two nations? Are there any differences, notable similarities and differences? Anything which is noticeable stands out, you have to figure out. Now, here, if you look at the first part, it says the bar chart shows the sector contributions to India's gross domestic product from 1960 to 2000. Step number 1. Whenever you start the introduction, you will write down the same first line in a different language. So for example, if it says bar chart shows, I can say illustrate. If I say contribution, I can say, see now look at this, the illustrate the relative percentage contribution made by the agriculture, industrial and service sectors to the Indian economy between 1960 and 2000. To the Indian economy between 1960 to 2000. You can never write the same sentence. You have to write down the same content in a totally different language. So that's step number 1. If it says illustrate here, make shows or states or provides information. Now, you could have changed the word contribution, or you can change from your between this to this. So between X and Y. So when I say between, it's always between X and Y. But when I say from X to Y, remember that. So it's between X and Y and from X to Y. So you have to change the first line. Never write the same sentence. So that's your step number 1. Step number 2, you will give the overall summary. Now, before you write the summary, obviously you have to focus on what are the key areas there. So first you have to understand, okay, chalo, we have from 1960 to 2000, I have 3 different contribution of 3 different sectors, agriculture, industry and services. So now agriculture sector is at the hem, was at the hem in 1960, 70, 80. Then there is a shift to services. So you have to focus on all those things, especially the highest and the lowest. So if in 1960, industry was the lowest, in 1970 also industry, 1980, so industry was lowest till 1990, but in 2000, agriculture became the lowest. So you're talking about, more or less, you know that it is because of the dominance of the service sector. So you have to make all those points first. Be careful of what is present and what is not there. The observation of the chart, even if you take 5 to 6 minutes and you take only 15 minutes to write, is absolutely okay. This is very, very important to observe. So now, after you have observed, so when you're doing the first para, do not focus on the numbers at all. The numbers will come in the body. In the first paragraph, you're only going to focus on the trend or what is a notable feature that you're seeing. So for example, in this, the answer is over the whole time period, the significance of agriculture declined steadily because it's a steady decline. See, so when you're not giving any numerical data initially. While services grew up an important decade by decade, there was a growth. So if you look at the trend, observation of trend and writing down the trend plays a very important role. So you have a trend in which you see an increasing trend as far as services are concerned and a declining trend as far as agriculture is concerned. So these things, if you can observe in any of the charts that you're given, and if you write that in the first para, nothing like it. Now, a different pattern emerged for industry, which initially showed a slowly increasing percentage, but then plateaued from 1980 onwards. I won't say, okay, yeah, it is C. So obviously, so it either, so this was a graphical jargon word, academic task 1 that you had to use. It was same for 3 decades, 1980, 1990, 2000. Because it was absolutely same for 3 decades, you use the word it plateaued. So this is your first para. Now, rule-wise, if you're writing 2 lines, you can write it in the second para separately also, but IELTS examiners expect you to write the introduction and the overall in paragraph 1 itself. So if you ask me, I would recommend you to write it in the first para itself. Now, in the next 2 paragraphs, you have to write a minimum of 4 paragraphs. And remember, if you write an overall, you don't have to really write a conclusion because overall anyway means a conclusion. So then you write the introduction and overall, if you're writing it together, then you can write even. So here what they have done is that introduction, overview is done in a second para. Purposely, it's not given separately because it can be a part of the introductory paragraph or it can be a second para. Now comes the 2 body paragraphs wherein you write, you give a lot of numbers, a lot of time reference and detailing. Here you have to focus always on, so I will tell you a very easy technique, always focus on the highest. Finish off with the highest the moment you start the body. And then in contrast or, so I'll tell you 2 methods, but one method is consistent, always start with the highest. After that, you can use how, in contrast, the lowest is this, you can do it that way also, or I'll tell you the other method. So let's look at this. So in 1960, agriculture contributed by far the highest percentage of GDP, peaking at 62%. Now here, if you're not, say here, for example, instead of writing 62%, when you're not very sure whether it can be 61.7 or 62, it's better to use approximately 60%. Okay, but honestly, it doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter if there's a difference of 1 or 2%, they don't care. But I'm just trying to tell you that you can also use the word approximately 62%. But it then dropped in steady increments to a low of 12% in 2000. So this is again a jargon that they use. It dropped in steady increments. Okay. And then you talk. So basically you give the numerical detail of the highest. You give the number details for the lowest. The service sector, on the other hand, always use connecting words, cohesive devices. You have to use a lot of cohesive devices. Remember that. On the other hand, however, nonetheless, nevertheless, Additionally, similarly, likewise, if you see that between two charts, they have this same trend, use the word likewise. So you have to focus on those parts very, very carefully. So the service sector, on the other hand, or you can start on the other hand, the service sector had a relatively minor impact on the economy in 1960. The situation changed gradually at first. You're talking about the service sector. Then its percentage contribution jumping from 28% to 43%. So basically, if you notice, you spoke about the agriculture and you spoke about the service sector. By 2000, it matched the high point reached by agriculture. So these are the notable features that you have observed. By 2000, it matched the high point reached by agriculture in 1960, showing a reversal in the overall trend. The other thing which I want you all to do is, the word trend, you have to observe the trend or the pattern. Remember, I'm doing this one in depth because the rule applies to all of them. So the first one I'm doing in depth, the next one I'm just going to show you the answers so that you get a clarity, and then you can look at the sample responses properly. So overall trend has to be mentioned either in second or in third paragraph, whatever trend you have observed. Now, industry remained a steady contributor. So industry remained a steady contributor to Indus wealth throughout the period. Steady. As a sector, it grew marginally. So these words, marginal growth, rapid growth, dramatic growth, soared up, reached a peak. Plummeted down, dramatic increase, drastic increase. Remain static, remain plateaued, stabilized. Your answer should have at least, in the lexical resource part of task 1, it's quite easy because you just choose words, and we have given it in all the in this slide. When you go you go through the slides, we have listed out all the graphical jargons that you need to know. Just focus on that. So this importance of the use of LRA here comparatively is much easier than in task 2 essay writing, where you have to use your own vocab. So here you have to only use words that are the part of academic task 1 language. So that is your next para. Fine. So 4 paragraphs, you have to make 4 paragraphs. So normally what happens, if you're trying to give an introduction and an overview together, you can give 2 paragraphs in the body, and then in conclusion, you can write, or to conclude, give a comma. You may or may not write. See, normally rule-wise, if you give an overall, you may or may not give a conclusion. But if you do not give an overall, you have to give a conclusion, otherwise it's an incomplete answer. So to ensure that, you can just write in conclusion if you want to give a different version of the thesis, the thesis overall idea, and a combination of something that stands out. You can do that in the last concluding paragraph also. Just remember, ensure that you make it into 4 para, the essay, the academic task 1. Okay, so focus on the most important. So most important would be the highest. Focus on the time frame and the tense. Any significant change that you can see, focus on that. Try to do a bit of comparison. Any similarity, comparison, contrast, definitely overall, which carries a lot of weightage. Okay, so and also use the graphical jargons. Okay, now word limit, though it's in lots of books or lots of blogs say that even 250 is fine, but I would say 180 to 190, do not cross that. Also remember, no informal language. Very, very formal way of writing. So when I say formal writing, as of now, you just focus on writing very short to the point sentences. A noticeable feature of the graph. Don't say that we can see or I can see and it can be observed. Things like that, and do not use anything informal. So I'm going to tell you about informal and formal in depth when we are doing task 2. Right now, just focus that language has to be to the point. No I and we can observe. It can be seen. A notable, no, as I told you, a significant feature, a quintessential factor. So those words are all there. For example, for an upward trend, whether you are going to write leap because there's a significant jump of more than 25%, or do you use an exponential growth, there's a boom, or do you write just a normal growth, it's slightly improved. So you have to decide on those words. Decrease, decline, fall, dropped, reduce can be reduction. Okay, so it just plunged is when there's a sudden dip. Collapse, dip, dwindle. Just remember, when you're using the rise word, use the word dramatic. When you're using, like if it's a dramatic rise, and drastic fall. Drastic is normally connected with a negative. Drastic fall, drastically plunged. Dramatic plunge you don't use. So dramatic is normally a positive connotation word and drastic is a negative connotation word. When you talk about stable trends, either you use the word remain consistent, unchanged, static, plateaued, maintain the same level. So I've given you lots of words. Whatever suits you, just remember 2-3 words. That's it. Now, fluctuating. Lots of times, especially when we are doing line graph, you're going to see a lot of fluctuation in the trends, especially line graph, okay? Whether there was an erratic rise and fall, fluctuation, whether it's a wild fluctuation. So fluctuation has a lot of very good words. Volatility is a very good word from the word volatile. Erratic and volatile. Fluctuation is a common word. Most of them will use you. So, for example, you want to write in 3 places. In one you use fluctuation, in one you use erratic, in one you use fluctuation. Now, whether it's a mild fluctuation or a considerable fluctuation, or it's a dramatic fluctuation, wild fluctuation. Now, these are just to give you idea as to use the usage of adverbs to give more depth to your language. Large movements would either be dramatic or substantial, exponential, noticeable. So just focus on 4-5 words. Okay, now substantial increase, exponential growth, noticeable feature, steep increase. So just focus on whatever you're comfortable. Slight would be negligible is a good word. Marginal, negligible, minimal. So normally I write these 3 words: negligible, marginal, and minimal. So now if you feel that, okay, fine, I think slight fits in with the other word which I'm looking, you can use a slight word also. Okay. So all these words. So if I'm saying considerably, a considerably greater amount or considerably more. So when you're using more or less or fewer, how do you use the word? Significantly more. But when you're using amount and number, how do you use a significantly greater amount? So this is, remember, when you're using for amount and number, this is the way you're going to frame the sentence. When it's more or less, this is the way you're going to frame the sentence. So this part, I want you to focus on amount and number, whether you're writing amount or number or more, less and few. And based on that, you have to decide how to use considerably, significantly, slightly, or marginally. Now, these have to be a part of your answer. For difference, again, considerable difference, or they are considerably different. Is it a slight difference or they are slightly different? So be very careful in the way you are framing the language. There's just some examples in which you have to understand the use of the word difference and different, because otherwise it comes as grammatical errors. To begin with, to start with, to commence with. In contrast, on the other hand, conversely, similarly, likewise. So in task 1, only these words are good enough. In task 2, you need more words. But in task 1, even these cohesive devices are good. When you want to highlight something, you will use the word significantly or in particular, or there's another word which is called quintessential. So when you have the word essential, before that write Q-U-I-N, quintessential, Q-U-I-N-T, quintessential. But I would like you to use it in task 2, then in task 1. In task 1, mainly, particularly, specifically, that should be good enough. Now, if you look at this one again, so it talks about places visited by different people living in Canada, and it does not give you, it only talks about cinema, theater, library, zoo, and it talks about the different percentages, right? So it talks about that, and it talks about percentage, and then when you're looking at it, you can focus on immediately if you want to focus on. So if you look at the 3 criteria, you have new migrants born in other countries, going to cinema, theatre, library, zoo. So if you look at new migrants, you see that maximum people are going in the through the library. So that means maybe I can infer that they're students or new migrants born in other countries. New migrants born in English speaking. That's blue. So that is for cinema, it is the highest. So anyway, cinema is one of the main sources of relaxation. That is for sure. That you can see. So all those things you have to focus. So cinema, out of, if you look at all the 4 features, cinema, theatre, library, zoo, cinema is preferred. Whether you're born in Canada or you're a new migrant from other countries, a new migrant born in English speaking countries, irrespective of whichever section you are, that's the highest, and theatre, going to theatre is the lowest. So anyway, you focus on the highest and the lowest, cinema and theatre. Now, out of library and zoo, what do you want to write? Whether you want to write about the new migrants using library, or in, for example, because you have to cover all the 4. Either do a comparison or whatever. You have to cover all 4. Remember that it can't, your answer can't be in a way that you write 3 features and totally leave the, for example, zoo. You can't do that. You have to talk about the zoo also. So focus on covering all the parts, definitely highest and lowest. Okay. So now if you notice, the chart shows the places visited by different people living in Canada. The chart gives information about the kind of leisure activities. Okay. Now, the cinema is by far the most popular. So always start with the highest. Always remember. Always start with the highest. It's very easy to start your body paragraph. Start with the highest. Give half of the migrants from and then it says 70% of non-migrants. And 65% of English speaking migrants. So you finish off the highest. Now, look at this part. Now, this is an interesting way they have written. So, half of the migrants. So, now when you completing with migrants, see, now I'll do the first para. The cinema is by far the most popular free time activity listed in the chart for those with English as their first language. Then, 70% of non-migrants and sorry, it was non-migrants. And the one was non-migrants and 65% of English-speaking migrants. Half of the migrants from non-English speaking countries, so that means other countries, also go to see a movie. Where is it? Yeah, movie, obviously to see a film. Interesting, 5% of this group prefer the library to the cinema. So here they have done a comparison of new migrants. They completed the cinema, but although they added library, because if you're talking about new migrants from other countries, you can see instead of cinema, the preference wise of new migrants in other countries, library is more than that. So they've mentioned that. So these are features that stand out. Okay. So now these are the things that you have to focus. Now then because he brought in this one, he finished off with the library by saying roughly, because it's not exactly 40%. So you can say approximately or roughly. So this is 40%, but this is not 40% exactly. The born in Canada. So you can say roughly 40% of the other 2 groups say that they visit the library. So at least you finished off that. Now, when you're talking about zoo are visited most by half of the English speaking migrants. So you have to speak about this. Now, what I would tell you to do is, after the highest, in contrast, theatre is the least popular for all concerned. So finish off the highest and the lowest in paragraph 2. Best way to do. Okay, finish off highest and lowest in paragraph 2. Then in paragraph 3, you can give all the extra details that you want to, and if you give a comparison. Always the most preferred, the least preferred, finish it off in paragraph 2. Use a contradictory word. So if you use in contrast in paragraph 1 of the body, in the next one you use on the contrary or, nonetheless, any of those words. Fine. And here, this was another approach just to show you that here you, instead of the word conclusion, you are ending. Now, instead of doing it in the starting, you're doing it at the ending. Ending, you write overall. It is perhaps unsurprising that Canadians prefer the cinema to the theatre, but the popularity of the library with new migrants may reflect the financial circumstances of these new citizens. Just a overall conclusion. So now what happens is that the overall conclusion at times can bring in some outside information. Like if you might think that it may reflect, you are not giving a very word with a lot of certainty. So what I did in my IELTS exam is that I always give a conclusion, and if, say for example, I would say something like, it might reflect that there are many students, or there are many there are many migrants who are pursuing their higher education or their education. It may. So I'm not giving any definite word. It is. So when I give a definite word, you're just making it a certainty. You cannot give a certainty word. You have to give it like, it might be because of that. It may be because of that. Now this you will do only if you're 100% sure that you want to write something. Otherwise, you can ignore it. Now, whenever you have a graph, line graph, this fluctuating erratic trends and patterns, starting lines, end lines. So what is this graph talking about? It talks about changes in birth and death rates in New Zealand between 1900 and 2101. So look at this, future predicted trends. So this is a dynamic graph, because you started with 1901 and you end at 2101. So your language after 21 should change. So forecasted, predicted. So this part, so this is a typical example of a dynamic chart where you're talking about a change in the tenses and other things. So this part is very important for you to focus. So you know birth and death rates in thousands, and you have the date. And then when you start with the death rate, just see the overall trend. Look at the birth rate. So obviously birth rate is higher, but then there's a decline. So you're talking about family planning or whatever. You can give anything as a conclusion. Death rate is comparatively. So you can look at all these trends. Okay, how many deaths and how many births. Now, so here gives information about changes. Here it starts with shows changes in the birth and death rates in New Zealand. And whenever you have anything in future, you have to use the word predict or forecast. There was another word which I'm not getting it right now. Predict, forecast. There's one more word. Anyway, so when I remember, I'll tell you. So forecast, you have to, in the starting itself, the first para itself, you have to talk about that it is something which is a predicted or forecasted, something which is forecast. Now, so whenever you're doing something which is dynamic, you have to first decide, how do I change into 3 different parts or 2 different parts? So normally it's always best to go from the past to the present, and then you have a separate line from the present to the future. It's always better that way, obviously. Okay, then it becomes easier for you to do. You can't do only past, because you do not know in the present how many years are you covering. So if I'm saying that, okay, 2021, 22, so again I'll go up, makes no sense. Okay, so it's always best to do past till present now, and then present to future in a different sentence. So now if you look at this, between 1901 and the present day, the birth rate has been consistently higher than the death rate. It's true. If you're doing a comparison, the birth rate has been, look at the graphical words, consistently higher than the death rate. And then obviously you have to give numbers. It stood at 20,000, very clearly says thousands, at the start of this period and increased to a peak. So look at the peak of 66,000 in 1961. Always whenever you are doing a line graph, always focus on the peak, whether it is a fluctuation, is erratic, wild, mild, stable. All those words are very important in line graph. The word fluctuation, volatile, in other words, erratic. Since then, the rate has fluctuated between 65 and 50. So all these fluctuation words is very important. Now, because it's talking about the future trend, it is expected to decline. You can write a separate sentence. it is expected to decline. It is predicted to decline slowly to around 45,000 deaths. So normally I want you to make two sentences. One is from the past to the present and one is from the present to the future. Next sentence, so you finish off with birth. Now, for example, you have two. If you have two, in one para, you only finish off with one. Second para, you finish off with the other. It's easy. But for example, you have four line graphs. So what you can do is that you can do two in para 1 and 2 in para 2. So remember, you will divide the number of information based on how many lines you have, because you can get till 4 lines also. So here there were only 2 lines. So in the first para, you just write about the birth rate. In the second para, you just write about the death rate. Start with a contradictory word. In contrast, the death rate started below 10,000 and has increased steadily until the present time. Present may you can stop. This increase is expected to be more rapid because there's a rapid rise between 21 to 200. What is this? 261. Whatever. Yeah, it seems 261. Why they've written 51? Okay. So when the rate will, correct. Rapid rise between 221 and 251. Okay, maybe. And when the rate will probably level off. So these are all future predictions. So you have to write probably and is expected. So remember, they are focusing a lot on the tenses. And for sure, just remember one thing, if you're not focusing on the tenses, immediately there's a dip of score. But comparatively, remember, task 1 is 70% easier than task 2. Now, overall, these opposing trends means that the death rate will probably overtake the birth rate in around 2041. So the place where they overtake, obviously, if the cross-section part, you have to always be very observant. If there is a large gap, the largest gap, if you want to write, you can write. So here what they did is that they just overall these opposing trends mean that the death rate will probably overtake the birth rate, and the large gap between the two levels will be reversed in the later part of the century. Maybe, it should be maybe. Probably will be. Probably. Feasible is also another word which you can use. Feasible is also possible. It's feasible that. Okay, possible. Now, normally whenever you are getting a pie chart, very rarely you're going to have only one pie chart. You will be having 2 pie charts or 4 pie charts. So if you notice here, the pie chart is on Japan. Here, whenever you have a pie chart, try to say whether you can talk about 2 times more, 3 times more, do a bit of comparison. So depending on which one you're getting, it's a table or a pie chart or a whatever. So decide on the language. So here the pie chart shows average household expenditure in Japan and Malaysia in 2010. So in 2010, and then you have housing, transport, food, healthcare, other goods. The word other, okay, another thing which I want to tell you. For example, in some question, if you feel that other is the maximum, never start with others, because it's not a clear, it does not specifically tell you about something. So even if others constitute a significant amount in a pie chart or in a table, never ever write others till the last. Nobody, see, when I say others, you are giving a very, you do not know what are the things which are covered in others. So why will you be interested at all to understand? So even if it's the highest, you are not supposed to write about the others. So purposely what they do is at times they'll give you questions. See, now here, for example, other goods and services, 29%. So rule wise, you should not start with this actually, because it's a second highest out of after healthcare. Not, is it housing? Yeah, after housing in Malaysia it's 34%. This is others is second. So rule wise, you are not supposed to mention, or it's preferable not to mention. I'm not going to say that it's not supposed to be mentioned. It's preferable not to mention the other category till the end. So you can start. So for example, if I would say this is the highest, which is other category, I would not start with the highest at all. I would start with the second highest, then go to the lowest, and then I will say that like maybe information was not sufficient, as a result 29% comprises other goods and services. Maybe, more surveys have to be conducted to come to a conclusion. Something like that I would have given in the conclusion, not in the overall. Okay, so this other part I want you to focus here. Now, see, look at this. They did not start with, so it can be clearly seen, it can be observed. So if you notice, starting with it can be seen, it can be observed, that in Malaysia, the greatest proportion, so most important, greatest, highest, was 34% on housing, while in Japan, accounted for just 21% of the total. So you know that actually it is the second highest. If you look at Japan, it's actually not the highest. Here, chalo, Malaysia, you can say because it's 34. This was not the highest, but still you would start with this. You ignore the other. Okay, so this other part, you will, so I want you to write this and immediately write the lowest. In contrast, the least is the housing. So this part, followed by Japan, the greatest single expense with other goods and services. So this part, don't write. Write it at the end. Food came at second place in Japan at 24%, while in Malaysia, so if you look at food, second place in Japan, whereas in Malaysia, it was higher, that is 27%. So higher, 24% here, 27%. Now, in Japan, another major expenditure, if you notice, it says, in Japan, another major expenditure was transport at 20%, but this was much lower in Malaysia, which is 10%. Now, there's a lot of difference. So what I would have used is, I would have used the word it's double the amount. Or it's, if I'm starting with this, it's half. So half, double, treble, triple, use those terminology to get an 8, 8.5 in task 1. Instead of writing 20%, 10%, the moment you can do a calculation and see it's triple the amount, double the amount, half, or always write that. The quarter of this. It always gives you more marks when you write. So the smallest percentage of expenditure was on healthcare. So now at times, if you feel that it is a surprising feature, you can use words like surprisingly. So these are all emphasis words. In both countries, the smallest percentage of expenditure was on healthcare. Now, here again, overall is given at the end. Overall, the data indicates that in both cases, food, housing, and other goods were the main expenses, while both countries spent least on healthcare. Overall thing. Now, this question will not give you more than, so this question I particularly took for a reason, to tell you that if you're not given a lot of comparison words, this answer will not give you more than 7. Whereas the first question, the first one that we did, is an 8, 8.5 answer. The second is also an 8. The third one will maximum be a 7.5 answer. So you have to focus on the depth of the task response that you are providing. The last part is your table. So at times you'll again get a table. Food and drink, housing, clothing, entertainment. Now the problem with tables is that tables carry a lot of information. You will normally never see a table which has, fewer than 5 countries or 5 items. It's a lot of information. Now, whenever you get a table, you have to do your observation very, very carefully. For example, do I look at either you start by looking at overall highest, which is 37%. That is in UK housing. Now, one is I look at the overall highest and the overall lowest clothing in France. Okay, so I look at the overall highest and lowest. Apart from that, in each of the categories, I focus on the highest. If there is a similarity, and the lowest, I keep it in mind. So I keep all those things in my rough sheet, and then I decide what to do and what not to do. Overall highest. Now remember, there's no, in a table does not matter what you do, because there are too many informations, numerical data given. So are you going to take one category in food and drink? Highest is in Turkey. They spend the highest in Turkey with 36%, closely followed by Spain, I can say, because this is a difference of 5%. Whereas the Germans spend the least, that is 22%. As far as housing is concerned, when I say this, the UK spend the housing in in housing, I can also use compared to spend who spend the lowest. I can also see that in the table, this is the highest percentage of monthly household income on this. I can say that because it's the highest in the entire thing. So either you take one at a time, do that. That's actually easy. And then if you want to find out some similarity between two or something which you can club together, for example, 37 and 33, do I combine UK and Germany together? Or I will definitely combine France and Spain together, 7 and 8% respectively. So these 2 points, I'm clubbing it together. I'll say France and Spain spend the least in clothing with 7 and 8% respectively. So all those things you have to remember, spend 5 minutes in just deciding what to write and what not to write. So let's see how they have written. The table shows the amount of household income that 5 countries in Europe spend per month on 4 items. The date has been calibrated in percentage is the line that you can also write. Overall, all 5 countries spend the majority of the income on food and drink and housing. What? Food and drink and housing. Food and drink and housing. Yeah. So these are the lower ones. These are the highest ones. So I would 31, 33, 37. So these are all in 30. So I would only focus on housing first. And I would say followed by food and drink. Instead of saying food and drink and housing, I would say spend the most on food and drink, closely followed by housing in these countries. So you finish off with the highest, then immediately in contrast finish off with the lowest. That is on clothing. So clothing lowest, housing highest. Now you finished that off. Now you start writing whatever you want to write. You want to do it together. Like it is clear from the chart, housing is the largest expenditure item for France, Germany, and UK, as all of them spend around 1/3 of the income on this. That's a good thing. Like as I told you, 1/3, half, twice the amount. These type of words will carry a lot of weightage. So obviously you're saying 30, 33%, 37%. So you're absolutely very good way of starting that you're spending 1/3 of your income in this. In contrast, they spend around a quarter on food and drink. So these words, spending a quarter, spending more than half, they will definitely carry a lot of weightage. Surprisingly, this pattern is exactly the opposite of Turkey and Spain, which spends 1/5 of the income on housing, but 1/3 on food and drink. Furthermore, so again, this is spending on clothing and entertainment are the 2 items which all 5 countries spend much less. Regarding clothes, France and Jane spend the least, at less than 10%. So I would say 7 and 8% respectively, or less than 10%, you're clubbing both of them together. That's again a very good way. So this is again a very good answer, score-wise. On the other hand, the other 3 countries spend around the same amount, ranging between 12 and 15%. So this is the way you're supposed to write. Fine? Okay, so now tell me, any questions? Any one of you have any questions? See, basically you have to write a lot.
Yeah, Vishali, while doing comparisons, are we supposed to write the data approximately or the correct number?
Even if you write, honestly, I told you, Neha, that day, does not matter. Okay.
Secondly, I have seen, I just went through these samples. I found that you have, in all the samples, the numerical data was mentioned in brackets also. So is it okay?
You can do it. You can do that also.
Okay.
That's perfectly okay. Okay. So whenever you're using contrast words, you can use it as a comparison or as a statement. See now, for example, when I say as a comparison, when you say the number was higher than, you talk about another figure in 2021. The figures were lower than in the previous decade. So you're doing a comparison. Okay, that way. Or the figure was the highest. By the end of the period, this figure was comparatively lower than the other. Okay, so comparison words are normally uh, with respect to relative. You can use words like relative to, with regards to, compared to, whereas, obviously triple, twice, greater, double, fewer, lower, roughly, minority, majority. many, much, equal to. These are all your typical words that you're supposed to use for, the comparison words.
Okay.
Better than, worse than, more than, least, as. These are all comparison words. Now, similar words would be almost, nearly, roughly, approximately, around. So those are your similar words. Okay, at times if you see something which is just slightly above, so you use words just over, just above. So at times you don't want to use the word approximately. You can use just above, just below, just over, just beneath. You can use also those words.
Okay.
Okay, so just remember you have to write, practice, like you have to do a lot of writing actually. In task 1, what I would suggest is that one bar, one pie, one table, one of each you should be practicing. One of each. One table, one pie, one bar, and one multiple. Like you have a combination of bar and this. That's the same thing actually. Just you have to make separate paragraphs. So when you have a combination, for example, the first paragraph you had bar chart, and you in the same thing you had two, one bar and one pie. So after the introduction, the second para you talk about, give all the information about bar chart. In the third paragraph you give all information about the pie, and then either in the starting or at the end you give the overall and the conclusion. Okay. Anything else? You have all this. So just remember, if you have a query, you can drop a mail to us. We'll address. And this is the WhatsApp number. Okay, so no other questions, right? None of you have any questions. So please practice this. So we'll be meeting on Sunday. And on Sunday, we are going to do the first 1 hour. I'm going to do letter writing. So all of you who are general students can attend, and otherwise also it does not matter. And then we do the essay writing. We are going to do three types of essay writing. And it's obviously a very important class.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay then. See you all.
See you
Please
all.
study. Yeah. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.